So hello everyone here today. Just a quick check-in, make sure we're all in the right Zoom meeting room. This one is the Developing Outdoor Recreation Offering session. If you did want to participate in the other one, the regional partnership, let me know and I can bump you over there. But I'm not seeing anybody waving their arms in concern, so I think we're all where we're supposed to be. Oh, just Sandy.
Yeah.
Great. So with today's session, there's a couple things we'd like to touch on here. So first off, Sandy McKenzie will be giving us a quick speech and presentation about developing outdoor recreation opportunities. He really is the expert in this sphere, so we're happy to have him here today. Once that's over, I'll moderate a quick Q&A opportunity. So if there's questions from the group, please share them, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion going. And then we'll round out the session if there's time with a bit of a sharing opportunity / workshop. So I would love to hear from some people on the call if you have ideas, or even more than ideas, if you've actually built some or plan to build some outdoor recreation offerings. That would be great to hear about them, and maybe we can talk about them, what some of the next steps, what might some of the challenges or opportunities be around that. And Eileen, I know you shared what you're working on this morning with the group, so hopefully we'll be able to get into that because it was really interesting. So, and then after that, we'll conclude the session and go to break. And yeah, any questions on that agenda? Is making sense?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so my pleasure today is to introduce Sandy McKenzie, and he has a quick bio here that I'd like to share with you. Sandy has had a remarkable 40-year career. Not to date you, but it's a 40-year career that had him working in a variety of outdoor settings. His career began in Ontario in 1982 as a forest firefighter, and him and I are actually kindred spirits in that regard. Back in the day, I was forest fire fought with the Hazelton Rainmakers out of Northwest BC. But that's enough about me. This is about Sandy. 12 years after he began his forest firefighting career, he tragically lost his wife to cancer, and his daughter was only 10 months old. So yeah, that was a really tragic happening. And you know, to provide for his family, he applied for a forestry job in Fort St. John, BC, and he moved there in 1995. 3 years later, he moved to Clearwater, BC, and there he worked as an operations technician for BC Timber Sales, and then as the district recreation officer. Sandy has said the district recreation officer job has been extremely rewarding for him. He will miss the work, but most of all, he will miss the people he has met and worked with over the years. And that's because Sandy is now set to retire on December 8th of this year. So we're very lucky to catch him before he went out the door, because December 8th is only a couple of weeks away here. So yeah, I hope everybody will join me in thanking Sandy for his many years of service, and also for joining us here today to talk about outdoor recreation. So with that, I'll pass the mic over to Sandy, and please feel free to begin your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Maxwell. That was a nice introduction. Yeah, I have really enjoyed my role as a recreation officer. It's been a real pleasure working with people like Eileen. You know, the dedication that I've experienced from people like Eileen through our partnership agreements has been really amazing. Anyway, I just wanted to give a quick brief overview of what Rec Sites and Trails BC is, then touch briefly on partnership agreements, which is the main agreement that we work through in order to manage our sites and trails. So anyway, the Recreation Sites and Trails branch is a provincial program delivered through a headquarters office in Victoria, 4 regions in 19 districts across the province. The purpose of the branch is to plan, develop, maintain, and manage a significant, diverse, and valuable network of recreation sites and recreation trails in order to provide safe, quality recreational opportunities for the residents and all visitors to British Columbia. In collaboration with other agencies and a wide variety of stakeholders, the branch manages public recreation use on Crown land in BC, outside of managed areas with BC Parks and also outside of municipalities. Recreation sites and trails are in a great part managed through the use of service contracts and partnership agreements negotiated with a variety of partners and stakeholders. So I'm just going to touch briefly now on partnership agreements. The agreements spell out specific recreation sites and trails included in the agreement and the responsibilities of the partner and the province for managing the sites and trails. The agreements can have or can be up to 10 years, but typically I have gone with a 5-year term, which was the old maximum term. I just find 10 years might be a little bit long. The agreement is not a financial contract. The partner must cover the cost of services provided. So this is through a few different avenues. One is the collection and retention of user fees. Other is funding sources such as grants or volunteer work. So grants is a real big piece of the funding required to manage our sites. User fees are used, but mostly on recreation sites where camping occurs. So if we look at an example like Kinbasket Lake in Valemount, they do have user fees there, which is $14 a night per site. And those fees are basically used to pay the site operators who are a permanent setting at our sites. They typically stay out there for the whole season. They're responsible for obviously collecting the fees, but also for doing general maintenance and cleanup around our sites. So the fees, and typically this is for nonprofit organizations or societies, are used to pay the site operators and also to pay for general maintenance. Any major undertakings, as far as new outhouses, as far as creating new sites, rec sites and trails typically take those types of projects on. So I would be applying for a capital project where I can access funds of $50,000 or greater. Now that's where I see some new sites being developed in the McBride area possibly. Just an overview of what I kind of manage as well. I have 19 partnership agreements in place. My area of responsibility is Clearwater to McBride. In McBride, I have 7 agreements. One, of course, is with the Backcountry Horsemen, with Eileen McDonald being the president. I have, partnership agreements with Big Country Snowmobile Association, with the Robson Valley Mountain Bike Association, Yellowhead Ski Club, Ozalinka Alpine, Fraser Headwaters Association, and on and on. Now, another thing that I've witnessed firsthand and saw the importance of shifting our focus, I guess you could say, in our rural communities is the loss of major industry. McBride lost it a few years back, Valemount as well, Blue River a long time ago, and Clearwater probably, what was that now, 4 years ago when Canfor pulled out of here. So I've really witnessed the impact of that happening in our rural communities. Also, I mean, it's always a challenge, to get support from government. I find when dealing with our rural communities and trying to come up with strategies and plans, to address attracting tourists to our communities. But I also, see firsthand the ability of rec sites and trails to really be a leader in this regard. And some of the biggest attractants that I see within our program and within our partnership agreements is mountain bike trails and snowmobiling. So Valemount VARDA, which is the Valemount and Area Recreation Development Association, which oversees the development and management of the mountain bike trails and the snowmobile areas in and around Valemount, did an economic impact study about 3 years ago just on snowmobiling. And it showed an income of $6 million a year brought in just from snowmobiling. With the development of the mountain bike trails, it's doubled, if not more. I see that, you know, in you know, cabins and stuff that have been rented, knowing the owners of these places, and you know, the individual saying to me that because of mountain biking now, I rent my places out year round instead of just in the winter time. So, you know, I mean, those are the two biggest attractants I see for bringing in tourists as far as rec sites and trails is concerned. So the Backcountry Horsemen, which Eileen and myself are in a partnership agreement with, and she's the president, have just recently, and I believe Eileen talked about this earlier, have just recently developed new trails and are developing a campsite too, particularly set for equestrian type users, right? So the campsite's going to be developed to accommodate the large trailers, obviously the horses as well. So we've got a water line that's coming down into the campsite. There's some amazing trails that are being developed to access into the alpine areas. We also have a few other sites under our partnership agreement. You know, I can't remember. I don't have our partnership agreement in front of us, Eileen, but there's a few other areas that that we also co-manage through our partnership agreement that have been very successful. Blueberry Trail and a couple others as well. So, you know, and I've talked with Mayor Runts in the past about developing some more campsites and trails possibly in the McBride area to do exactly that, and that would be to attract new people, you know, tourists to come visit McBride. Now, the one thing that I'll note here as well is when we are developing new sites or trails, the first thing or the first people we really have to concentrate on is our locals. We need to address their needs and wants as far as our trails and sites are concerned. And then we start building momentum from there, where we're looking at attracting tourists to come into our towns. So yeah, I find that extremely important that we certainly address the needs and wants of our local people first. And then of course we start attracting tourists to come in, because obviously, you know, with major industry pulling out of our towns, our rural communities, tourism has become our main economic driver. And I really found it extremely rewarding being able to help in that regard, as I indicated earlier. What else do I have here? Yeah. So we do have a number of hiking trails as well. The Ozalinka Alpine Club and Fraser Headwaters Alliance are the two main proponents that have developed these trails. And truly they're amazing. I mean, their locations are quite remote. The scenery, as you guys know, is absolutely amazing. One of the biggest challenges that I see time and time again is access. We use probably 100% Forest Service roads to access our sites, or road permit roads that are under the management of licensees. So what happens when there is no more industrial activity on these roads is either the government ministry or the licensee has to remove their liabilities. And what that means is pulling bridges and all infrastructure associated with these roads, which leaves us really struggling. You know, when I first started, the Door River was a real area of contention because of exactly that. So we had a big meeting. We had a meeting with some managers and engineering staff out of Prince George, you know, myself and my manager, and of course, you know, local community members who had a very vested interest in this area. The only solution that we could come up with was for them to get a license of occupation over the area, which meant basically they took on the roles and responsibilities of managing this road. You know, and at the time, you know, there was, I can't remember the number of bridges, like 4 or 5 bridges on the particular section of road that, you know, they wanted to maintain. And I said to them at the time, I said, do you understand what you're getting yourself into here? Right. And that's, you have to look after the roads and the infrastructure associated with those roads, meaning bridges. Some of these bridges, just to replace them, just to purchase a bridge is $500,000, if not more. And then of course, there's another couple of $100,000 just to put them in place. You know, some bridges, it's $100,000 just to remove them. So the cost associated with managing these roads it's just too much for somebody, you know, like a nonprofit society, obviously, to manage and look after. It is not part of our mandate, that being Rec Sites and Trails BC, to take on vehicular traffic roads. Now, what we did come up with was, you know, changing some of the road sections into trails where we could now take those on, right? We could take them on under our partnership agreement. We could help manage them, you know, by providing some cost recoveries, not much, but we do provide some cost recovery. You know, it's only a couple $1,000 because, well, my budget isn't very big either. You know, and our budgets got impacted greatly, you know, about back in 2003, I think it was, when the partnership agreement, you know, strategy first came into place, because that's how they saw the only way moving forward on how to manage these sites and trails. But anyway, guys, I think maybe I'll leave it there for now. You know, and I just wanted, and I know Maxwell's going to step in here and kind of facilitate this. But I just kind of wanted to open it up to questions. I didn't want to be a talking head for too long here. You know, so I just wanted to open the floor, if that's all right, Maxwell.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone on the call here have any questions for Sandy? Oh, I think Eric's going to jump in. You got one?
For sure. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Thanks, Sandy. That's a, you know, that was a great synopsis of exactly what the issue with McBride is. Is just like, there are significant, you know, the caribous tend to be around 9,000 feet in elevation, so often bad weather will skirt over top of them. So you can actually do a lot of experiential education on the glaciated surfaces there, while the weather is bad everywhere else, right? But everything that needs to be done in the upper door or any you know, towards the Ossalinka or past there is on a logging road, and those logging roads, you know, as they get deactivated, or I mean, if you go look at the old forest or the forest management plan, which had the backcountry skiing area at the end of a 30-kilometer log road up to Castle, it's just like those roads don't exist anymore, and so the opportunities are gone, right? And so the abilities to get into certain places means either you buy a quad or some other ATV, assuming that the bridge is still there and getting across it. So I mean, that's the biggest issue, and it's, you know, Washington State for a while had legislation indicating if you're a resource company and a road was designated as a recreational opportunity, you are mandated to keep that road open, whether you were pulled out or not, right? So McBride has phenomenal opportunity that's being lost every single year because of that. Because there's no way a community. I sit on management committees for Alberta Public Land as well with the government. Same issue. You can't devolve that responsibility onto user groups. They can't afford the insurance and the liability. We've actually, one community club I've worked with has built a bridge, built to BC standards, because that's the only standards we could find, on Alberta public land, right? But you have to give up you have to have ownership. You have responsibility for the structure, but you don't have ownership of the structure because it becomes a crown asset, right?
Yeah.
So it's problematic, to say the least. Those opportunities, like, I mean, and there also has to be, you know, awareness, you know, of dual purpose opportunities. You know, certainly, you know, like the snowmobiling opportunities, the groomed trails are awesome on Bell and Lucille, and I
Yeah.
use them. But you know what? That impedes summer access because that produces erosional factors on the road in summertime, and so those areas become less available for people driving lower clearance vehicles because they can't get up the road because the road's getting chewed to pieces, right? So
Right.
it's just there needs to be I think like a governmental, and depending on what level of government we're talking about, strategy in response to dealing with the issues of access, because otherwise not everybody, especially if you're looking at the tourism sector, and that's an aging sector, people don't want to beat the heck out of their vehicles, or hike for 3 days through the bush, right? So that's that. You know, so I appreciate your synopsis. I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So yeah. Thank you.
No, I figured I did, Eric, and thank you. That was well said. And I've always, you know, made this contention too, is that the government needs to shift its focus, right? You know, not completely on industrial activity, which of course, you know, provides a lot of income to our government, but so does tourism, right? And you hit the nail on the head again when you mentioned insurance, because that's what killed that initiative, you know, for the community group, was they looked into insurance and it was just, you know, astronomical. You know, it kept increasing year after year after year until it got to a point where there's just no way they can afford it, right? So you're absolutely right. And I don't know what the fix is there, to tell you the truth, guys. But, you know, like I said, I mean, we've got some really good people in government that do tend to reach out and try to support us. And the Renshaw, the bridge at 2 kilometer, you know, right now was downgraded to 0. And of course, caused a huge uproar, not only with the snowmobile club, but with others who access the area for fishing and other recreational purposes. So the you know, through conversations, you know, we had, you know, the engineering folk in Prince George offered up and gave the parts needed to fix the bridge to bring it back up to 10 ton, so that at least we could get the groomer over it, right? So that's just huge, and so appreciated. But you know, it's a temporary fix. And you know, this temporary fix, when I was talking, you know, with the engineering officer, because you know, the support beams and the decking, you know, had to be replaced, and the footings were starting to rot. And he's going, Sandy, this is $100,000 fix. And I went, what? He goes, no, I'm serious. Like, we're looking at $100,000. This is kind of a unique situation, and it happened in, you know, with my predecessor, Elaine, where this road again was going to be deactivated because Carrier pulled out, had no interest back there. They were going to deactivate it. And then of course there was a big uproar in McBride, rightfully so, because at the time this was seen as the main area that attracted snowmobilists to come to McBride. And it still is one of the big areas that attracts a lot of riders, right? So anyway, I don't know how Elaine, you know, convinced our director, but we took this road on as a trail, and now there's 5 bridges on it, and some of them, you know, other than the one at 2 kilometer, are going to need replacing. However, Carrier now has stepped forward and says we do have interest in the back, right? Because I think, you know, there's some cable loggers that have you know, most recently come to be, and I guess that's why they're going to go back in there, right? So they're going to replace the bridge, and they're going to be doing the fixes on the bridges, which is really great, because I got to tell you, working hand in hand with our licensees is extremely important, and a big part of how we get things done, let's just say, on our FSRs and road permit roads. you know, and I've had really positive relationships with our licensees where they've done a bunch of work on some of our access points into our sites by, you know, by grading the roads in, by replacing some culverts for us. So they've been really supportive over the past while. But again, you know, once it comes to the point where they have no more interest in a particular area, you know, these roads, they have no other options really. And I kind of like your scenario there, Eric, the one in down in the States there. I you know, because I talk with the engineering officer on a yearly basis, and we identify, you know, high value recreation roads where they can, you know, they can apply and get more funding to do upgrade and maintenance work on these particular roads, right? But again, you know, once industrial activity starts to stop in these back roads, man, that they have to pull them. You know, so I really don't know what to do except for obviously local governments, you know, municipal governments, you know, going to their meetings, UBCM, and pushing this agenda, and getting the powers that be, you know, in line and supporting, you know, what we need in our rural communities. Because our rural communities, and I'm sorry, I'm on a bit of a soapbox here. I mean, you know, we're hurting, and we have been for a number of years. You know, and if you look at the past and who creates the GDP in our province, well, of course it's the rural communities, right? You know, and we just get and I know it's all political and all that type of stuff. But again, you know, you know, this is one big issue that needs to be tackled. And I'm going to shut up now, guys. Sorry. I just want to, yeah.
Oh yeah, well, all points well taken there, Sandy. And don't speak too soon because I think Karen has a question for you, so we'll get you talking right away.
Okay.
Karen, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to ask something?
Thanks. I'll just make a couple of points and trends that I'm seeing in grants, for example. So It seems that one hand of government is not talking to the other. In other words, we encourage, the government is encouraging these relationships with people like yourself, Sandy, to set up agreements, partnership agreements for recreation access in our region, for example. And then on the other hand, the level of government that's responsible for, you know, resource roads says, well, too bad, you know, those roads aren't going to exist anymore. So it's like, those are contradictory and it doesn't make sense. That's frustrating. Right. I'm seeing a trend in grants where it says you must consider the quality of life for residents. So that's a theme that I'm seeing, and it's certainly been expanded upon since COVID. And even our Northern Development Initiative Trust, which is primarily an economic development grant body, includes that line in almost every one of their grant applications now. So I think we're seeing that shift, and you reiterated that. You said that yourself earlier about how in partnership agreements and new trails and sites, you have to consider the needs and wants of local residents. So I think it's a place there where we can maybe develop that even further and talk about, you know, how grant funding is prioritized and how rec sites and trails areas are prioritized based on the needs of the local community. The tourism side of it is a bonus for sure, and is awesome if you can grow tourism in your community. But I think, considering what people really want in their own backyard, and because it's their yard, they're the ones servicing it and dealing with it and don't want to see things destroyed and so on. So I think it's important to consider that. Also, you know, rural communities like ours are along the major transportation routes in the province, in addition to the supporting and creating wealth for the province. So it is important to make sure that these communities do well and thrive, because where else are you going to get your gas and your groceries from when you're traveling? And the major transportation routes, you know, they're important to get goods across the province and resources down to the coast and so on. So I think there's room for those bigger discussions at UBCM and so on. And then also just, how can we better advocate for roads to stay open, for rec sites and trails to be better supported broadly across all levels of government?
Yeah, really good points, Karen, and I completely agree. And again, I mean, this is kind of why I wish I was working a little bit longer, you know, to work with people like you, Karen, and Eric and Alan. You know, I mean, coming up with a strategy, to present to government, to do exactly what we're talking about, I think would be huge. And again, I mean, I really do see rec sites and trails as the government body that could definitely, help move this forward. And maybe we could get bigger budgets, where we could support local communities, rural communities better. We could support, people like Eileen a little bit more, because it's a real struggle, because, our partnership agreements are based solely on volunteers, right, Eileen?
Yes.
And these volunteers, and again, they just absolutely amaze me with their dedication and their work ethic and all the time that they put in. And Eileen can speak to this better than I, but just the applications for grants, Karen, like you were kind of alluding to a couple there. I mean, it's not an easy thing. So anybody that's getting into this and is looking at, at these grants, I mean, Eileen's one person, Roy Howard's another, Jeff Corbett's another guy that have done very well at getting grants in place. So using that knowledge and expertise, I think, is critical too for anybody who does want to, start creating some new sites or trails in the community. Now, the mountain bike trails are pretty cool. I mean, they're not as developed or, as extensive as Valemount. But I tend to use Valemount as an example of a rural community that has been successful in shifting their focus, to attracting tourists. And it's almost, when I look at Valemount and I look at McBride, because you guys are neighbors, there's a lot of interaction there. I know the mayors talk quite a bit and others as well, but you look at the location, right? Valemount on Highway 5, McBride on Highway 16. It's like apples and oranges almost, right? Because of the location of Jasper and Edmonton and Highway 5, where they can just come through into Valemount, where to get to McBride, you got to kind of take a bit of not a detour, but, a trip up Highway 16. And I don't know what, I'm just kind of speaking off the top of my head here, I guess, a bit. But I think that's one area too. I don't know, Karen, maybe you can talk to that, maybe needs to be marketed a bit better.
Well, I'm just going to jump
Eric,
in.
sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I just don't mean to jump in, but I'm going to.
Yeah, no worries.
There are significantly different trails and different topography. I mean, I know the trail builders do have, discussions between themselves, and I know there's been some frustrations with the trails at McBride due to, again, that's a labor of love for a couple of people, and
Yeah.
You see them out there doing the work by themselves, and I go like, holy cow, buddy. But I also have some frustrations, and having people understand that the people doing the construction tend to come from an industrial background, and sometimes the trails get a bit steeper than they need to. But I mean, they're a really good start. And, certainly people have been building trails. A group of people have been building trails well before that showed up. But there's also a very odd initiative. Well, not initiative, but there's also people in McBride, the community, need to want that, because I have frankly heard this quote a number of times. We don't want the trails in McBride to be like the mountain bike trails in Valemount.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you don't want tourism, you won't have it, right? And then,
That's right.
Yeah. So it's kind of conversely. Those same people will say, well, you also want to build a mountain bike trail over to Paradise Mountain and come down, Paradise Valley Trail. But you can't have one without the other. If you build stuff, people will come. But I lived for 9 years in Fernie, BC, which is a small town, and it went through the same thing. The coal mines shut down. There was massive unemployment, and the transition to tourism there was really difficult. And people was like, basically, we don't want people coming into our community. Flat out said that. And so there needs to be a bit of a mindset change, I think. So trails, like for instance, the mountain bike trails are already grassing over at McBride because of lack of use, right? And so you need to have a critical mass to support trail development, whether it's mountain bike, hiking, or whatever, right? And so a change of culture, and I think you certainly see it in Valemount. I mean, Valemount 30 years ago probably would never have thought about tourism as an opportunity with the the log yards there, et cetera. But it's just it really is a mindset thing, and so I was quite surprised to hear that we don't want the trails to be like the Valemount trails. Well, they won't be if you don't let people know they're there or want people on them, right?
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with making your trails unique to the area. I get it. I wouldn't want to copy Valemount either, because if people want to ride trails like Valemount, well, go to Valemount. And we had this initial marketing strategy, and this was another individual, who wanted to do basically the whole North Thompson, right? So McBride to Barrier, right? And why not? I mean, you can go riding in McBride, you can go riding in Valemount. Blue River is now, we have a trails committee in place, and they're now starting to develop mountain bike trails as well, because they want to be a year-round, tourist area. And they're obviously big in wintertime with Mike Wigley, and also the snowmobiling in that area too. And Clearwater as well. And I get that too, Eric. I mean, from the snowmobile club here in Clearwater, they're saying, no, we don't want people from Alberta coming to ride our trails. And I'm going, wait a minute, why? Well, it's because it's our backyard and we want to keep it, pristine, and we want to keep it for us and all this type of stuff. And you're absolutely right. It's a culture shift that needs to occur, because then you have those in the tourism industry saying, wait a minute, no, you guys are wrong. We want to attract tourists here. So getting those two groups together and kind of, a melting pot, so to speak, where, maybe we can develop areas, or there can be areas where it's just for locals. I know that's extremely difficult and probably not doable, but you're right. I mean, you either got to or you don't, right? You either want to attract tourists to substantiate your town and support the local economy, because major industry is now gone, blah, 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 whatever it may be. But yeah, those two mindsets, Eric, I think you kind of nailed it on the head there for sure. Yeah.
And Eileen, I promised you could go next. Sorry, you've been waiting.
Oh, sorry. That was when the
Okay.
road stuff was going on, and I had a comment then, which I'll still tell you in a minute. But with the mountain bike things, we can also market uniqueness. And actually, they're totally different hills. One is very thrill-seeking, and it's very much downhill and lots of gadgets. And there are other. Ours is very technical. And I've heard really positive stuff. We're up there a lot because we paid a lot of money into those trails as well, and we use them. And we have heard a lot of positive comments from people who say they'd like to do both. Because the McBride ones are a lot more technical and not so many bridges and loops and things like that. That's one thing. But, our son is world mountain bike pit champion, and he prefers to ride trails. Because you get tired of the up and down in Valemount, but he doesn't both. But just to say that, he sees a lot of opportunity here. But I think we have to market it as come to both places, market it together as a package,
Absolutely.
But anyway, there is some very unique stuff going on there. The other thing I wanted to mention, though, with the roads is a little bit of a success story for us. When we were looking at road to access our campground, we looked at the forestry road between Bell and McIntosh, because it looked like the easiest way to go, the flattest route, blah, 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 blah. And then we realized we would have to maintain that, whereas the one where there's a permanent resource industry on, i.e. a run-of-the-river water project, that road is being maintained by the run-of-the-river water project, which is a long-term project, not short-term, like people go out and log a site, then they don't need to have access anymore. They have to go out and maintain that, and they even keep it open in the winter. They plow it all winter, that road. So of course we pick the other road that is already being maintained by a longer-term resource industry than logging. So I think, that's a success story. If we can look at that, we looked at the one that the loggers were using and said no, because in the end we're going to have to do something with it.
and it would have cost us a lot of money. But just, but it was a good strategy in the end.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, hey, Eileen. Yeah, absolutely. I get what you're saying. The comment was, and maybe it wasn't clear, the comment was there was too many people in Valemont and they didn't want that in McBride. I ride the McBride trails all the time because they're steeper and more technical, right? But it's just like those trails will devolve because, you know, it's such a lush environment that if they're not getting used, they're just going to go away, right, naturally. So, so I found it really interesting that people were saying, well, yeah, we want trails, but we don't want anybody to ride them.
You know, and Ingrid and Hal, you know, who I have a partnership agreement with for the mountain bike trails, are, again, extremely dedicated to the trails. You know, Hal this year, he said, you know, Sandy, he says, we're not building any new trails. I just want to spend, you know, my time and effort and resources on upgrading and doing maintenance on our existing trails. And I said, that's awesome, Hal. I said, because all the other clubs and groups need to really start looking at that. You know, moving forward is okay, where are you going to get funding for your maintenance? Because yeah, it requires a lot of maintenance. And, you know, as was stated earlier, I mean, Valemount has, I mean, I don't know how many kilometers of trails. It's amazing because they did that loop trail down by Swift Creek now too. And I think that's 25 kilometers or something, right? And a much easier trail system to ride because, you know, people were asking for those types of trails. And I know here in Clearwater as well, there's not a lot of really high technical trails per se, but, you know, again, what we did or what they did here is they put a campsite, you know, right on the trail system. And it's been extremely popular, you know, because that seems to be what the ridership is looking for, right? Is we want a place to be able to camp where we can just jump on our bikes and we're on the trails. And that's what was developed here. And nothing but positive remarks on that too, right? So again, kind of making your trail systems unique in that regard, not only the trail design and stuff, but, you know, having something like a campsite on it, I think is pretty cool.
Eileen, do you have a follow-up point to that? Oh, I think you're muted.
You're muted.
Thank you very much. Just a follow-up point to what you're talking about maintenance, Sandy, and you're very, very right. And I think that's where partnerships, community partnerships are very important. We've partnered with the bike club on the McBride mountain trails, and there's only, you know, a few sections that are horse related, but we also do hiking on them. And then up on Bell Mountain, that's why we chose Bell Mountain, is because we can work very, very effectively and collaboratively with the ski club so that we maintain the trails and they're ready for snow, for the track setting as soon as the snow hits. And with the sled club. So the three of us work together, as well as community forest up there. So we are very, very fortunate to have that partnership. So the maintenance is shared among all of us. And that's so important for future planning. So if it's possible, and if there are activities that don't conflict each other, like there's places where mountain bikers and horse people shouldn't be on the same trail, and we sit down and talk about that, you know, and there definitely are. There's very significant safety issues with that in places. So, but still we can support each other, and we still, like I say, we still all hike as well. So we still all feed. So it works.
Excellent point, Eileen.
Yeah, see,
Karen has a question there, Max.
Yes, Karen, you're up next. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that, you know, Sandy, you mentioned a cultural shift, and I think that needs to happen. If we want to focus on tourism in the community and build it, it also has to happen in a business shift, a mindset to how do we build and support business, how do businesses support the tourism sector? So we have, you know, mountain bikers are a great example of where they want to go to a brewery or a brew pub after they come down from the mountain, and in Valemount, that's there for them, right? There's a couple great coffee shops and some, you know, great brew pub, and we have some of that now, but you know, are our businesses meeting the needs of the tourists as they come through in order to get them to stay? Because what they might do is drive down Main Street and see that nothing is open when they come off the hill at 5, and they just go on to Valemount. So it's kind of like, helping build that momentum and providing those opportunities, seeing that showing businesses that there are opportunities for them to build their businesses.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point for sure, Karen. And I mean, you can just use the snowmobiling community as an example, because they all tend to, to gather in Valemount, and that's where they stay. And they'll do a day trip up to McBride to go riding up in McBride, or they'll do a day trip to Blue River and go riding in Blue River, but they're always going back to Valemount. And I think it's exactly what you just indicated, is because that infrastructure is there, the hotels, the restaurants, all that type of good stuff, right? So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there for sure.
So has the community actively pursued getting a brew pub, but interested in our, because you're very, and we go down there for that reason. Oh, we make sure we don't go down there on Tuesdays when we have appointments because they're closed. It's so important. And it's a mix of the older and the younger generations at the same time too, when you go there. So it's so important. And I don't know, is the community actively looking at that? We have friends who owns a brew pub down in Salmon Arm, and they've asked me that. Hey, is your community looking for one? You guys need one,
Yeah.
Is it, Alan, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to finally speak, I guess. Relative to the trails and the bridge work that needs to be done, I think that we should put the pressure on the contractors, like the Canfors and Carriers of the world, who take all that fiber out of our community or our area, and haul it away, process it, make money, ship it wherever they want to get their final product to. And yes, the province does get its stumpage and some relations, but I think that we need to put the emphasis on them to either substitute the bridge, so that maybe a 10-ton bridge is enough for the groomer to go over. I mean, like the Renshaw is the perfect example this year, because I had a couple of people talk to me about panic situation, because we have a lot of sledders who come to town. Bell is known as the beginners kind of sledding.
Yeah.
Lucille is your intermediate, and then Renshaw is your expert or your real, advanced kind of sledding. That people want to have that exposure to. So we have the 3 different categories for sledding, and they were really worried, because Renshaw is a very popular one with the Albertans when they come to go sledding in. And appreciate that Sandy was contacted and stepped in and helped us with. I know that Mayor Runts had phoned him and talked to him nicely, I hope.
Oh, yes.
And then the other thing with regards to some of the business development in the community, the catch-22 situation appears. There isn't enough to support us all year long, but there isn't enough finances. If the locals would get involved and participate, we might get more of those kind of brew pub or something like that would attract people to come to our community and stay in our community. I know that motels right now are pretty full. Workers from the pipeline, obviously, they're even staying in McBride. I think this year we're going to have a real tough time with sledders, both Valemount and McBride, because we're overflowing right now with occupancies in the hotels. And I think the objective at the beginning, a few years back, I ran the Husky here in town for quite a few years. A few years back was trying to even out the tourism from we had this high in the winter and this low in the summer months where people were just coming through and zipping on their way. And we've got these attractions. We just got to promote them better. But we need accommodations too.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, thanks, Alan.
That's my.
No, and again, yeah, Eric, yeah, good point, Eric. I saw everybody kind of agreeing with your point too. Yeah, I was going to make a comment here now, but it kind of slipped my mind, Alan, after what you just said. because, you know, it made a lot of sense. Oh, I know what it was now. So licensees do have what they call a social contract, you know, where they do supply support, are supposed to supply support to recreationists, for example, and you know, our partnership agreement holders, and you know, and myself too, and like I said earlier, they've been very supportive. But I agree, like, I mean, why not? You know, why not put some money towards these bridges to maintain them and keep them in place? Why not have a big sign, you know, saying, you know, thank you, carrier, whatever it may be, right? You know, helping to market, you know, the carriers in the world that, you know, look at what Carrier did here. You know, they put all this money into these roads and the infrastructure that allowed us to access back into these beautiful areas, to do recreation and to attract tourists. And they've helped greatly. And I mean, wouldn't that be a benefit, you know, to that company? I mean, excuse me, especially in the light of all the, you know, the environmentalists and stuff that's happening, that's impacting, you know, the forest industry, the old growth areas and all that type of stuff, right? It's always bad news when it comes to our licensees and what they're doing out there on the land base. You know, a little bit of, you know, positive, you know, positive feedback or showing, you know, for our licensees, I think they would really appreciate that, and they quite frankly need it.
That's a great point, Sandy. Yeah, very well taken there.
Thanks, Max.
So my big question, because it is a very good point, is are there going to be any action items from this discussion?
Yes, Eileen, it's all you too, by the way. So.
I've learned not to say yes.
Well, yeah, in terms of action items, well, yes. So I've been taking notes here, and what we're going to be doing is once the forum's concluded, we're going to be putting together kind of like a summary package of, you know, what we heard through these sessions, what are some action items you may want to think about moving forward. And we've actually touched on a few here today. Sandy was coming up with some, and the rest of us, Eileen, Eric, Alan, Karen, you all had really great ideas on how you can move forward. So the idea is we'd summarize what we heard here and give that to the village and also all of the participants, so you can use that as a document moving forward. And look at that, we've already hit basically the end of the session here. I mean, I kind of feel sorry for closing it. Yeah, we've been talking for an hour.
I know. I
feel like you could go for another hour or more.
Yeah, me too.
Right on. Well, that's good. I mean, it's great to see the passion for it. That's really needed to move some of these things forward. So, yeah, with that, I guess I will conclude the activity. I mean, I got to say thank you to Sandy for joining us here, and I hope you have an enjoyable retirement. I know it's coming up soon. So good on you there. And for the rest of us, we'll now be going into a 15-minute break, followed by a tourism success stories panel discussion starting at 2:15 p.m. So I hope you'll all come back to join for that. Yeah, I think that about wraps it up. Karen, if you wouldn't mind ending the recording, and if everyone can say bye to Sandy.